I never imagined myself in this position. I've always seen myself as a loyal wife, supportive and understanding. But sometimes life throws you curveballs in ways you'd never expect. This isn't the type of story I'd ever have wanted to tell. Yet here I am, sharing it with you, and hoping it might bring a little clarity. If not to me, then maybe to someone else. It all started last summer when my husband, James, and I decided to take on the care of a beautiful horse, Bella. She was a striking chestnut mare with an easygoing temperament. The decision to get Bella was mostly James's. He'd grown up around horses and wanted to pass on his love of riding and nature to our kids. We're both very family-oriented, and Bella felt like an addition to our little family. She was just perfect. We live in a small town where everyone knows everyone, and in a place like ours, there aren't many secrets. Our lives revolve around routine, stability, and the comfort of familiar faces. One of those familiar faces was William. I'd known him since high school, and we ran into each other now and then, always with a quick hello and a friendly smile. He was well known around town for his love of animals and his talent with horses. It wasn't long before he started coming by to help me care for Bella when James was busy. At first, I didn't think much of it. William's experience with horses was invaluable. He'd grown up on a ranch, and his way with animals was like nothing I'd ever seen. He and Bella had an almost immediate connection, and I found myself grateful for his help. I'd spend hours talking to him in the barn as he taught me how to handle Bella. It seemed so harmless. A couple of old friends catching up and sharing a love of horses. What could be wrong with that? But as the days turned into weeks, our conversations deepened. William would share stories from his past, talking about the life he'd led, the dreams he'd chased, and the dreams he'd let go of. I found myself sharing things with him that I hadn't shared with anyone else. Not even James. There was something about being with him that felt safe, yet thrilling. We'd laugh over little things, swap stories from our high school days, and somehow, I started looking forward to his visits. One day, we were working together to clean Bella's stable, and I remember a moment where our hands brushed while we reached for the same tool. It sounds so simple, doesn't it? But there was this undeniable spark, this rush of adrenaline that I hadn't felt in years. I tried to shake it off. I thought I was overthinking things, letting my imagination run wild. But the next time he came by, I couldn't ignore the tension between us. It was as if an invisible line had been crossed, and I didn't know how to step back. I still loved James deeply, but my feelings for William were growing confusingly complicated. I knew I was treading dangerous waters, but I couldn't deny how alive I felt around him. The truth is, our marriage had settled into that comfortable stage where the fire wasn't as bright as it used to be. Life had taken over, with kids and responsibilities filling up most of our time. Being with William was like rediscovering a side of myself I'd long forgotten. Things escalated slowly in subtle glances and lingering smiles, moments where we'd find ourselves standing a little too close, laughing a little too hard at each other's jokes. It was never physical, but the emotions behind it were powerful enough to feel like something tangible. One rainy afternoon, when William and I were sheltering from the downpour in the stable, he reached out, his hand grazing my shoulder, and I didn't pull away. We stood there in silence, the sound of rain pattering on the roof, both of us trying to make sense of what we were feeling. I knew, deep down, that I was playing with fire, but I couldn't seem to stop myself. Then came the day that would change everything. James had been working long hours, and he was planning a surprise weekend getaway for us. Just the two of us, a chance to reconnect. I was thrilled by the idea and eager to escape the mess of emotions that had started to cloud my mind. But on the day we were supposed to leave, James had to make an unexpected stop at work, which meant we couldn't leave until later. Frustrated but understanding, I went out to the stable to pass the time with Bella. When I got there, I found William already in the stable, brushing Bella's coat. Our eyes met, and there was a silent understanding between us that didn't need words. I felt the weight of every decision I'd made up to that point, every choice that had led me here, standing in that stable, alone with him. For a brief moment, I wondered if I'd lost my mind. How had a simple friendship turned into something so complicated, so intense? And that's when it happened. The moment James walked into the stable and saw us. He'd left work early to surprise me, excited for our getaway, and walked in at precisely the wrong moment. The look in his eyes was one of disbelief, hurt and anger all at once. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. The air was thick with tension, with questions neither of us were ready to answer. I felt my heart sink as I watched the betrayal unfold on his face. William quickly stepped back, mumbling something about needing to go, and within seconds, he was gone. It was just James and me, standing in that stable, surrounded by the remnants of what I'd almost let happen. After William slipped out of the stable, the silence that filled the space was almost deafening. I felt exposed, trapped in my own mess, like every secret and hidden feeling I'd been harboring was now laid bare. James was still standing there, not moving, just staring at me. His face looked a mixture of confusion, hurt, and a glint of anger that cut me deeply. My heart pounded as I tried to think of what to say, but no words came. I wanted to explain, to somehow take back everything that had led up to this, yet I knew that was impossible. "Jessica," he finally said, his voice low and guarded. What was that?" His words hung in the air, and I knew this wasn't a question with an easy answer. I could feel tears welling up, but I forced them back, not wanting to break down in front of him. At least not yet. "James, it's not what you think," I started. But even as I spoke, I realized how hollow those words sounded. I could see that he didn't believe me, and honestly, could I even blame him? My emotions for William might have been unspoken, but they were real. And as much as I wanted to say it was just a harmless friendship, I knew that wasn't true. James took a deep breath and looked away, as if he was trying to control himself, to hold back the storm I knew was brewing inside him. Finally, he looked back at me and shook his head. "I trusted you, Jessica. We've built a life together, and I thought I knew you. But seeing you with him, you have no idea what that felt like." His words hit me hard. The guilt was overwhelming, pressing down on me with a weight I hadn't expected. I loved James. I truly did. But somewhere along the way, I'd let my heart wander, allowing myself to get wrapped up in feelings for someone else. I couldn't pinpoint when it had happened, but it was there, and I couldn't deny it any longer. "James, please listen," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. It was nice having someone to talk to, someone who understood me. I never meant for things to get this complicated." He looked at me with disbelief, his eyes narrowing. "Understood you? I'm your husband, Jessica. I'm supposed to be the one who understands you. But instead, you let some guy from town get close to you, closer than you'd let me be in a long time. Do you even realize how that makes me feel?" Hearing him say that made me realize just how much I'd taken him for granted. Over the years, we'd fallen into routines, both of us so focused on keeping things running smoothly that we'd forgotten to nurture our relationship. Somewhere along the way, we'd stopped having those deep conversations, the kind that used to make us feel connected. Instead, I'd turned to William, sharing parts of myself that should have been reserved for James. "I know I messed up," I said, my voice shaky. "I know I should have come to you instead of letting someone else fill that space. But I didn't realize how lonely I felt until it was too late." He was silent for a moment, and I could see the gears turning in his mind as he tried to process everything I'd said. Finally, he let out a sigh, his shoulders slumping as if the weight of all of this had finally come crashing down on him. "I need some time to think, Jessica," he said, his voice softer than before. "I need to figure out if I can trust you again, if we can rebuild what we had. I don't want to throw everything away, but right now, I just don't know." Hearing those words hurt, but I knew he was right. Trust isn't something you can break and then just glue back together. It takes time, patience, and effort. And I knew that if I wanted to save our marriage, I'd have to prove myself to him. Show him that he was the only person I truly wanted by my side. In the days that followed, things were tense between us. We'd go about our daily lives, both of us trying to act normal for the sake of the kids. But there was a wall between us now, one I didn't know how to break down. Every time we'd look at each other, I'd see the hurt in his eyes, and it would tear at me all over again. As for William, I stopped all contact with him. I knew that was the only way I could even begin to make things right with James. I avoided places I knew William might be, and I didn't respond to any of his attempts to reach out. Part of me wanted to explain, to say goodbye properly, but I knew that even a single conversation could reopen the wounds we were trying to heal. Then, one night, as I was getting ready for bed, James walked into the room and sat on the edge of the bed, his hands clasped tightly. I could tell he was struggling, and I waited, giving him the space to say whatever was on his mind. "Jessica," he started, taking a deep breath. "I've been doing a lot of thinking. About us, about what happened, about where we go from here." I felt my heart race, fearing the worst. But instead, he reached out and took my hand, his grip warm and steady. "I still love you," he said, looking me straight in the eyes. "I don't want to lose what we've built together. But I need to know that you're committed to this, to us, that you won't turn to someone else the next time things get hard." The relief I felt was overwhelming, and I could feel the tears spilling over. I nodded, my voice trembling as I spoke. "I am, James. I want this. I want us, and I promise you I'll never take you for granted again. I'll do whatever it takes to rebuild what we had." Over the next few months, we worked on our marriage, going to counseling together, opening up in ways we hadn't in years. It wasn't easy, and there were times when it felt like we were making no progress at all. But gradually, bit by bit, the walls between us began to come down. Looking back, I realized that this ordeal had forced us to confront the things we'd both been avoiding for years. In a strange way, it brought us closer than we'd been in a long time. Our marriage isn't perfect. It still has its challenges, and we both have to work at it every day. But now, when I look at James, I see the man I fell in love with. And I know he sees me too. As for William, he eventually moved out of town. I haven't heard from him since, and honestly, I'm okay with that. I think we both knew that whatever connection we had was born out of a moment of weakness, a temporary escape from reality. But that's all it was, an escape. One that nearly cost me everything I held dear. So there it is, my story. I'm not proud of what happened, but I hope that by sharing it, maybe someone else will think twice before letting themselves drift away from the person they love. Because sometimes all it takes is a single moment to lose everything that truly matters.